Are you certain you're living this Lenten season the right way? Many believe that small sacrifices like giving up meat or avoiding certain pleasures are enough. But Padre Pio taught us that true penance goes far beyond these superficial actions. What if I told you that the sacrifices you're making might not be opening your heart to the transformative grace this sacred season offers? Padre Pio, whose hands bore the wounds of Christ and whose soul was deeply united with God, revealed that Lent isn't merely a period of restrictions, but a sacred opportunity to grow in holiness, turn away from sin, and draw closer to God with a renewed heart. It's a divine call to true conversion, to detach ourselves from what separates us from grace and commit to a deeper path of faith. But here comes a crucial question. Which penances can truly change our lives? What sacrifices open our hearts to God's grace and strengthen our souls in faith? Padre Pio left us a powerful legacy through his life of prayer, sacrifice, and unconditional love for God. His teachings aren't simply empty rules or traditions, but a proven path to sanctification and union with Christ. We cannot ignore this message. Lent isn't just any season, it's a serious call from God to approach Him sincerely. If we take these penances seriously, we'll experience a peace and spiritual strength that perhaps we've never felt before. It's an opportunity we shouldn't let pass. Many of us focus on external practices without understanding their deeper purpose. We give up chocolate, social media, or certain foods, believing these actions alone fulfill our Lenten obligation. But Padre Pio warns us, external sacrifices without interior transformation are like empty vessels. They make noise, but carry nothing of value. Today, I'll share with you the 7 most powerful penances according to Padre Pio. These aren't just random acts of self-denial, but carefully chosen spiritual practices that can completely transform your soul. The last one, which I'll reveal toward the end, has the power to revolutionize your spiritual life entirely. What makes these penances so special? They target not just our bodies, but our souls. They address not just our actions, but our intentions. They transform not just our habits, but our hearts. And most importantly, they bring us into a deeper communion with Christ's suffering and resurrection, the very essence of what we celebrate during this sacred season. If you truly desire to live this Lent with depth and meaning, write in the comments, Padre Pio, intercede for me this Lent. This simple act of faith opens your heart to receive the wisdom I'm about to share with you. Now prepare yourself for a journey of spiritual transformation as we explore Padre Pio's most powerful Lenten practices that have led countless souls to profound conversion and lasting peace with God. One of Padre Pio's most important teachings is that penance isn't merely an act of bodily mortification, but a conscious renunciation of sin, a constant surrender in prayer, and generous service to others. The true Lenten journey doesn't consist solely of abstaining from certain foods or making meaningless physical sacrifices. It's about a profound transformation of the heart, a genuine conversion that allows us to draw closer to God and reflect His love in our daily lives. Padre Pio lived Lent with extraordinary intensity. While we know him for his visible stigmata, the wounds of Christ that he carried for 50 years, few understand the depth of his interior suffering and sacrifice. He would spend entire nights in prayer, often sleeping just 2 or 3 hours. His fasting was rigorous, sometimes consuming only the Eucharist for days, yet he never spoke about these sacrifices or drew attention to them. For him, these were simply expressions of love for God and soul. But Padre Pio would be the first to tell us that such extreme practices aren't what God asks of most of us. What touched him deeply was seeing ordinary people making extraordinary spiritual progress through simple but authentic penances. He often said, God doesn't need our works, He needs our love. This profound statement reveals the true purpose of Lenten sacrifice, not to impress God with our ability to endure hardship, but to remove the obstacles that prevent us from loving Him completely. In our modern world, we've lost sight of what Lent truly means. The 40 days Jesus spent in the desert weren't simply about physical deprivation. They were a time of intense spiritual battle, prayer, and preparation for his public ministry. Similarly, our Lenten journey should be a time of spiritual combat where we confront our weaknesses, strengthen our prayer life, and prepare ourselves to live more authentically as Christians. Many of us approach Lent with a checklist mentality: give up sweets, attend Friday devotions, put some money in the poor box. While these practices have value, they can easily become mechanical routines that don't touch our hearts. Padre Pio challenges us to go deeper, to examine what truly separates us from God and others. The Church gives us this sacred season as a gift, 40 days, to break free from spiritual complacency and rekindle our first love for God. It's a time to clear away the spiritual clutter that accumulates in our hearts, just as we might clean our homes thoroughly after a long winter. This spiritual house cleaning isn't meant to be a burden, but a liberation, removing what weighs us down so we can rise with Christ at Easter. Padre Pio understood this profound truth. During Lent, he would see a remarkable increase in penitents coming to confession. Many would tell him they came because they felt an unexplainable urgency to reconcile with God. "This is the time of mercy," he would say. "Don't let it pass you by." He recognized that Lent creates a special opening in the human heart, a time when we're more receptive to God's transforming grace. And now, let's discover the first powerful penance that Padre Pio taught, a practice that goes beyond mere external observance to touch the very core of our spiritual lives. The first and most important penance Padre Pio emphasized is fasting from sin. As he often said, "What good is it to abstain from certain foods if we continue to feed our souls with gossip, resentment, envy, or indifference toward God?" This profound insight reveals a fundamental truth. External sacrifices have little value if our hearts remain unchanged. Fasting from sin means making a conscious effort to correct those attitudes and habits that distance us from holiness. Each of us has a predominant fault, a sin that repeatedly appears in our lives despite our best intentions. For some, it's impatience that flares up at the slightest inconvenience. For others, it's pride that makes us defensive when corrected. Still, others struggle with an uncharitable tongue that's quick to judge and slow to praise. Padre Pio advised his spiritual children to identify this predominant fault and focus their Lenten efforts on combating it. "Don't try to fight all your sins at once," he would counsel. "Instead, choose the one that causes the most damage in your relationship with God and others, and attack it with all your strength." How do we practice this fasting from sin? Padre Pio suggested concrete daily commitments. If your struggle is with impatience, pause and take a deep breath before responding to provocations. If you tend toward harsh judgments, make a point to find something positive in each person you meet. If you're prone to excessive worry, replace anxious thoughts with short prayers of trust. This form of fasting requires constant vigilance and humility. We must become aware of our triggers and patterns. We may need to avoid certain situations that lead us into temptation. Most importantly, we must immediately ask forgiveness when we fall and begin again without discouragement. Padre Pio assured us that God is more pleased by our perseverance after failure than by our success without struggle. The second powerful Lenten practice Padre Pio recommended is holy silence. In our noisy world, we're constantly surrounded by distractions. Social media notifications, television programs, music, and superficial conversations. We find it difficult to be silent because noise gives us a false sense of companionship and prevents us from confronting our interior life. Padre Pio lived silence as a form of deep prayer, knowing that the noise of the world often prevents us from hearing God's voice. He once told a spiritual daughter, "In the silence of your heart, God speaks." But how can you hear him if your interior life is filled with noise? This holy silence isn't merely the absence of sound, but an attentive listening to God's presence. During Lent, We can practice holy silence by creating technology-free zones in our day. Perhaps we commit to turning off our phones during meals or for an hour before bedtime. We might drive to work without the radio, allowing our minds to rest in prayer instead. We can become more mindful of unnecessary conversations that drain our energy or lead us into gossip. Padre Pio particularly recommended silent time before the Blessed Sacrament, where we simply sit in God's presence without agendas or words. "Oh, just be there," he would say, like a child resting in his father's arms. This seemingly unproductive time is actually deeply transformative, allowing God's love to penetrate the depths of our being. The third essential pillar for living Lent, according to Padre Pio, is intense prayer. He insisted that it's not enough to pray. We must pray with our hearts, as if it were our last opportunity to speak with God. Many of us repeat prayers mechanically, without really thinking about what we're saying or to whom we're speaking. For Padre Pio, prayer wasn't a duty to fulfill, but a love affair with God. Witnesses report that his face would become transfigured during prayer, reflecting an intimate communion that transcended words. While most of us won't experience such mystical prayer, we can all approach God with greater sincerity and focus. During Lent, Padre Pio encouraged dedicating more time to prayer, but even more importantly, bringing greater quality to our prayer. He recommended praying the Rosary with devotion, meditating on Christ's Passion, or spending time in Eucharistic adoration. He also emphasized the importance of speaking with God as we would with a close friend, expressing our concerns, gratitude, and petitions with an open and humble heart. One practice Padre Pio particularly recommended for Lent was the way of the cross. By walking with Jesus through his final hours, we unite our sufferings with his and gain perspective on our own trials. When you feel the weight of your cross, Padre Pio would say, remember that Jesus has already carried it for you, and now he walks beside you, helping you bear it. To understand the power of these first three penances, consider the testimony of Marco, a businessman who came to San Giovanni Rotondo in the 1960s. He described himself as Catholic in name only, attending Mass occasionally, but living a life focused entirely on material success. After a brief meeting with Padre Pio, during which the saint looked into his eyes with penetrating intensity, Marco felt compelled to make a complete confession. It was as if he could see all my sins, Marco later recalled. I couldn't hide anything from him. Padre Pio gave him 3 penances: to fast from his habitual lying in business dealings, to spend 15 minutes in silence each morning, and to pray 1 decade of the Rosary daily while meditating on the Passion of Christ. These seemed too simple to make any difference, Marco admitted. But I promised to try, more out of fear of the friar than love of God. Within weeks, these simple practices began to transform him. The fasting from dishonesty forced him to confront his rationalizations and compromised ethics. The daily silence created space for self-examination he had always avoided, and the brief prayer connected him to Christ's suffering in a way that gradually softened his heart. 6 months later, Marco returned to San Giovanni Rotondo a changed man. I came to thank Padre Pio, he said, but he simply smiled and said, thank God, not me. I gave you little penances. He gave you great grace. Now, before we continue with the remaining penances, I want to offer you a special resource that can help deepen your Lenten journey. In the ebook, The Spiritual Secrets of Saint Padre Pio, you'll find powerful prayers, reflections based on his teachings, and practical advice to strengthen your spirituality. This resource is perfectly aligned with what we're discussing today and will provide you with daily guidance throughout this sacred season. The link is pinned in the comments section below. But now, let's continue our journey. The penances we've discussed so far prepare the ground for even more transformative practices that Padre Pio revealed. The next ones touch the very core of Christian life and lead us to profound spiritual growth. The fourth powerful penance that Padre Pio taught is the acceptance of suffering. In our comfort-oriented culture, we naturally try to avoid pain and discomfort. We take medication at the first sign of a headache. We adjust the thermostat when the temperature is slightly too hot or cold. We distract ourselves with entertainment when faced with emotional distress. There's nothing wrong with reasonable comfort, but Padre Pio recognized that our reflexive avoidance of suffering often prevents profound spiritual growth. Padre Pio suffered intensely throughout his life, both physically through the stigmata and spiritually through interior trials and demonic attacks. Yet he rarely complained. When asked how he could endure such pain, he would reply, "It is through the cross that we go to heaven." He saw suffering not as punishment, but as a privileged opportunity to unite with Christ and participate in the redemption of the world. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or neglect legitimate medical care. Rather, it means accepting with peace and trust the unavoidable sufferings that come our way. When illness strikes, when relationships become difficult, when financial problems arise, instead of asking, "Why me?" we can say, "Lord, I offer this suffering for love of you and for the conversion of souls." Padre Pio taught that suffering accepted with love becomes redemptive. It no longer diminishes us, but expands our capacity for compassion and understanding. He would tell his spiritual children, "The cross will not crush you. If its weight makes you stagger, its power will also sustain you." During Lent, we can practice this penance by intentionally embracing small inconveniences without complaint. Perhaps we don't reach for the remote when we're slightly cold, or we wait patiently in a long line without checking our phones. More importantly, we can offer our significant sufferings, chronic pain, grief, anxiety, as prayers for those in greater need. Consider how a tree grows stronger when faced with wind and storms. The resistance causes its roots to grow deeper and its trunk to become more flexible yet resilient. Similarly, our souls develop deeper roots of faith and greater spiritual flexibility when we accept suffering as part of our growth rather than as an obstacle to our happiness. The fifth penance Padre Pio emphasized is bodily mortification, which doesn't refer only to fasting from food, but to renouncing unnecessary comforts and worldly pleasures that often distract us from what is essential. In Padre Pio's time, these might have included excessive food and drink or indulgent leisure. Today, they more commonly include social media addiction, binge-watching entertainment, consumerism, and various forms of digital escapism. The body is a good servant, but a terrible master, Padre Pio would say. Mortification helps us regain control over our physical appetites so they serve our spiritual goals rather than dominate them. These small renunciations, done with love for God, can strengthen our will and center our hearts on what truly matters. Padre Pio practiced extreme bodily mortification, including severe fasting and the use of disciplines, physical penances. However, he was careful not to recommend such intense practices to most people. Instead, he suggested proportionate sacrifices that challenge us without harming our health or preventing us from fulfilling our duties. For example, during Lent, we might commit to limiting screen time and using that time for prayer or service, eating more simply without eliminating necessary nutrition, taking shorter showers or using cooler water, rising 15 minutes earlier to begin the day with prayer walking or taking stairs instead of more convenient options. The key is to choose mortifications that address our particular attachments. If social media consumes your attention, limit it. If comfort foods are your escape, simplify your diet. If sleeping in is your indulgence, set the alarm earlier. The goal isn't suffering for its own sake, but freedom from what holds us back spiritually. Think of this practice like pruning a fruit tree. A skilled gardener cuts away certain branches, not to harm the tree, but to direct its energy toward producing better fruit. Similarly, through thoughtful mortification, we redirect our energy from less important activities towards spiritual growth and service to others. Imagine walking through an orchard in late winter. You see two trees side by side. One appears untouched, with branches growing in every direction, some crossing over others, creating a tangled mass of wood. The other has been carefully pruned, with selected branches removed and others trimmed back. To the untrained eye, the pruned tree might look diminished, even damaged, but the experienced gardener knows which tree will bear more fruit. The untouched tree will expend energy maintaining all its branches, resulting in smaller, less abundant fruit. The pruned tree, though it appears to have lost something, will channel its strength into fewer, stronger branches that will produce larger, more plentiful fruit. This is precisely how Padre Pio understood mortification and suffering. What appears to be loss becomes gain. What seems like diminishment leads to abundance. The sacrifices we make during Lent, the pruning of our lives, ultimately lead to greater spiritual fruitfulness. Let me share with you the story of Eleanor, a young professional who struggled with anxiety and perfectionism. Working in a demanding corporate environment, she measured her worth by her achievements and others' approval. Though raised Catholic, her faith had become a background element in her life, reduced to occasional Sunday Mass attendance. During a particularly stressful period, Elena took a weekend retreat at a monastery where a priest spoke about Padre Pio's teachings on suffering and mortification. Initially skeptical of these outdated concepts, she nonetheless felt drawn to try a simple experiment. For 1 week, she would accept minor inconveniences without complaint and offer them as prayers. The first day was revealing, Elena later shared. I realized how often I complained about traffic, about waiting in line for coffee, about colleagues who worked differently than I did. Simply pausing before each complaint made me aware of my impatience and entitlement. By the week's end, this small practice had created enough interior space for Elena to recognize a deeper truth. Her anxiety stemmed from trying to control everything. The practice of accepting small sufferings became a gateway to surrendering larger concerns to God. For Lent, she decided to add a form of mortification that addressed her specific attachment. She would check work emails only during designated hours rather than constantly throughout the day and night. This simple boundary created space for prayer and reflection that had been missing from her life. What surprised me most, Elena said, was that these practices didn't make me less effective at work. They made me more focused and creative. By letting go of the illusion of control and constant connectivity, I found a deeper source of strength. This is the paradox that Padre Pio understood so well. What we surrender in love, we receive back transformed. The practices that seem to diminish our lives actually enrich them in ways we couldn't have imagined. Now, as we prepare to explore the final 2 penances, which Padre Pio considered the most powerful of all, ask yourself, what suffering am I currently resisting that I might accept with love? What attachment might I need to prune from my life to bear greater spiritual fruit? These questions lead us naturally to the culmination of Padre Pio's Lenten teachings, where all the previous practices converge and find their fullest expression. We now arrive at what Padre Pio considered one of the most transformative practices, frequent confession. Few saints have devoted themselves to the ministry of confession as completely as Padre Pio. He would spend up to 16 hours a day in the confessional, listening to penitents from around the world. Some waited days just for a few moments with him. Why was he so devoted to this sacrament? Because he witnessed its extraordinary power to transform lives. Confession is the soul's bath, Padre Pio often said. You must go at least once a week. I do not want souls to stay away from confession more than a week. Even a clean and unoccupied house gathers dust. Return after a week and you will see that it needs dusting again. This striking metaphor reveals Padre Pio's practical understanding of human nature. Even when we're trying to live virtuously, we accumulate spiritual dust, venial sins, attachments, and attitudes that gradually distance us from God. Regular confession removes this dust before it becomes so thick that we no longer notice it. During Lent, Padre Pio encouraged even more frequent confession. He saw this season as an ideal time for deep spiritual house cleaning, not just removing surface dust, but addressing deeper issues that may have accumulated over years. Many penitents reported that after confessing to Padre Pio, they felt an extraordinary lightness, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Some described it as being born again. What made confession with Padre Pio so powerful? Witnesses report that he had the gift of reading souls, often revealing sins the penitent had forgotten or was too ashamed to mention. But more importantly, he communicated God's mercy with such conviction that even the most hardened sinners left transformed. He was simultaneously uncompromising about sin and overwhelmingly compassionate toward sinners. We may not have access to a confessor like Padre Pio, but the same sacramental grace is available in every confession. During Lent, consider making a more thorough confession than usual. Take time for careful examination of conscience, perhaps reviewing your life since your last good confession. Approach the sacrament not as a duty to fulfill, but as a healing encounter with Christ the physician. Padre Pio offered this advice for making a good confession. Be specific about your sins. Vague accusations serve no purpose. Say how many times you committed each sin if possible. Mention relevant circumstances. Be completely honest. God already knows everything, and He awaits your acknowledgement not to punish you, but to forgive you. After receiving absolution, Padre Pio counseled spending time in gratitude rather than rushing away. The moments after confession are precious, he said, as it is then that the soul is most receptive to God's grace and inspiration. We now come to what Padre Pio considered the crowning penance, the one that both requires and produces the most profound transformation: limitless charity. Without charity, he would say, fasting is just starvation, prayer is just words, and confession is just empty ritual. In Padre Pio's understanding, charity means far more than giving money to the poor, though that can be part of it. True charity is nothing less than seeing and treating others as Christ would, with patience, kindness, forgiveness, and genuine concern for their welfare. It means loving the difficult person at work, the neighbor whose political views offend you, the family member who has hurt you repeatedly. Padre Pio demonstrated extraordinary charity throughout his life. Despite his own physical suffering, he founded a modern hospital for the poor. Despite his exhausting schedule, he took time to respond personally to thousands of letters seeking spiritual guidance. Most remarkably, he showed the same attention and love to each person who came to him, whether they were wealthy benefactors or simple peasants. During Lent, Padre Pio encouraged his spiritual children to practice what he called heroic charity, going beyond what feels comfortable or reasonable. This might mean volunteering with the most marginalized in your community. It might mean reconciling with someone who has deeply hurt you. It might mean giving more generously than you think you can afford to those in need. The paradox of charity, which Padre Pio understood perfectly, is that it appears to diminish us but actually enlarges us. When we give our time, attention, forgiveness, or resources beyond what seems reasonable, we don't end up with less. We become more fully human, more aligned with our true purpose, more filled with authentic joy. Consider charity as the ultimate form of fasting. We fast from selfishness, from the illusion that we are separate from others, from the fear that there isn't enough love to go around. And in this fasting, we find ourselves more satisfied than any worldly indulgence could make us. These 7 penances that Padre Pio taught, fasting from sin, holy silence, intense prayer, acceptance of suffering, mortification of the body, frequent confession, and limitless charity, are not isolated practices, but an integrated path of transformation. Each reinforces and deepens the others. Fasting from sin creates the interior space that holy silence requires. Silence enables the focused attention that makes prayer genuine. Prayer provides the strength to accept suffering without bitterness. Accepting suffering makes bodily mortification meaningful rather than masochistic. Mortification prepares the heart for honest confession, and confession releases the grace that empowers true charity. Together, these practices create a powerful current of transformation, moving us from self-centered comfort-seeking to Christ-centered love. They gradually strip away layers of egoism, attachment, and spiritual blindness, revealing our true identity as beloved children of God, called to love as He loves. Let me share with you the story of Robert, a successful attorney whose life was transformed through these Lenten practices. Robert described himself as culturally Catholic, but admitted that his faith had little impact on his daily life or decisions. His primary values were professional success, financial security, and maintaining a comfortable lifestyle. A series of personal crises, health problems, family conflicts, and professional setbacks left him feeling empty despite his outward success. "I had achieved everything I thought would make me happy," he recalled, "but I felt more anxious and dissatisfied than ever." Through a friend's invitation, Robert attended a retreat focused on Padre Pio's spiritual teachings. Initially skeptical, he nonetheless decided to try incorporating some of these practices during Lent. He began with silent prayer each morning and made his first confession in over a decade. "The confession was the turning point," Robert shared. "I expected judgment, but instead I experienced a mercy that I couldn't comprehend. It was like a dam breaking inside me." This initial experience led him to explore the other penances. He began fasting from harsh judgments of others, a significant challenge for someone trained in critical thinking. He practiced accepting professional setbacks without the anxiety that had previously consumed him. And most transformatively, he began volunteering at a legal aid clinic, offering his expertise to those who couldn't afford representation. "What amazed me," Robert said, "was how these practices that seemed like they would diminish my life actually enhanced it beyond measure. I expected to feel deprived, but instead, I felt liberated. I expected to lose ground professionally by giving away my time, but I found new purpose and satisfaction in my work." By Easter, Robert had experienced what he could only describe as a complete reordering of priorities. The practices didn't end with Lent, but became integrated into his ongoing spiritual life. "Padre Pio was right," he concluded. These aren't just Lenten practices, but a pathway to a completely different way of living." Robert's story illustrates the potential these 7 penances have to transform not just our Lenten observance, but our entire lives. They address the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, and reorient us toward our true purpose, to know, love, and serve God, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. As we prepare to conclude our exploration of these powerful Lenten practices, consider which of them speaks most directly to your current spiritual needs. Where is your growth most hindered? Which practice seems most challenging and therefore might offer the greatest opportunity for transformation? The beauty of Padre Pio's approach is that we can start with any of these practices, and it will naturally lead us toward the others. As we draw our journey to a close, let us reflect on the profound wisdom Padre Pio has shared with us. These 7 powerful penances, fasting from sin, holy silence, intense prayer, acceptance of suffering, mortification of the body, frequent confession, and limitless charity, form not just a Lenten program, but a pathway to authentic holiness. Padre Pio once said, "The life of a Christian is nothing but a perpetual struggle against self. There is no flowering of the soul to the beauty of its perfection except at the price of pain." These words may sound harsh to modern ears accustomed to messages of comfort and self-affirmation, yet they contain a liberating truth that our comfort-obsessed culture has forgotten. The path to true joy often leads through sacrifice and self-giving. Look back on your own life. When have you felt most fulfilled, most alive, most connected to your true purpose? Was it when you were pursuing comfort and pleasure? Or was it when you gave yourself generously to something greater than yourself? Was it when you protected yourself from all pain, or when you embraced a worthy challenge despite the difficulties involved? The saints consistently testify that real happiness comes not from accumulating pleasures or avoiding discomfort, but from aligning our lives with God's purposes, even when that alignment requires sacrifice. This is the paradox at the heart of Christianity. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Matthew 16:25. Lent invites us into this paradox. Through the practices Padre Pio has shared with us, we voluntarily lose our life, our attachments, our comfort, our self-centeredness, so that we may find our true life hidden with Christ in God. We embrace the cross not out of morbid fascination with suffering, but because we know it leads to resurrection. As we approach Holy Week and Easter, I encourage you not to let this sacred season pass without leaving a mark on your soul. Choose at least one of these penances to practice with special intention during these remaining days. Perhaps you feel called to deepen your prayer life or to fast more intentionally from a particular sin. Perhaps you need the healing grace of confession or the transformative power of extending charity to someone who has hurt you. Whatever practice speaks to your heart, embrace it not as a burden, but as an invitation to greater freedom and joy. Remember that you are not alone in this journey. The same Holy Spirit who guided Padre Pio through his extraordinary life of holiness dwells within you, ready to strengthen and inspire you if you open your heart to his promptings. Padre Pio himself offers us this encouragement. Pray, hope, and don't worry. Worry is useless. God is merciful and will hear your prayer. These simple words contain profound wisdom. Our Lenten practices are not meant to make us anxious or scrupulous, but to help us surrender more completely to God's loving providence. The goal of Lent is not perfect performance of religious obligations, but a heart increasingly configured to Christ's heart. If you fail in your Lenten commitments, as we all do at times, don't be discouraged. Begin again with humility and trust. Padre Pio often told his spiritual children, in the spiritual life, you must take one step forward each day in a straight line, starting again the next day as if you had done nothing yet. This patient perseverance, this willingness to begin again without discouragement, is itself a powerful form of penance. It requires us to fast from perfectionism and self-reliance, to accept our limitations with humility, and to depend more completely on God's grace. As we conclude, I invite you to share in the comments one insight from Padre Pio's teachings that has touched your heart, using the phrase, "Thank you, Padre Pio, for teaching me." Your testimony may be exactly what another viewer needs to hear to take their next step in faith. Remember that the practices we've discussed aren't meant to end with Easter. They form the foundation of an authentic Christian life throughout the year. The intensity may vary with the liturgical seasons, but the essential elements remain the same. Turning from sin, listening to God in silence, communicating with Him in prayer, accepting suffering with love, practicing self-discipline, receiving His mercy in confession, and extending His love through charity. Let us close with a prayer that Padre Pio often recommended to his spiritual children. Stay with me, Lord, for it is necessary to have you present so that I do not forget you. You know how easily I abandon you. Stay with me, Lord, because I am weak and I need your strength. Stay with me, Lord, for you are my light, and without you, I am in darkness. Stay with me, Lord, to show me your will. Stay with me, Lord, so that I hear your voice and follow you. Stay with me, Lord, for I desire to love you very much and always be in your company. Stay with me, Lord, if you wish me to be faithful to you. Stay with me, Lord, for as poor as my soul is, I want it to be a place of consolation for you, a nest of love. Amen. May this Lenten season be a time of profound grace and transformation for you and your loved ones. And may the powerful penances revealed by Padre Pio lead you to the fullness of Easter joy.